any more time making a speech. I'll hand it over to Nisith, who will conduct a conversation. My request to him had been, and to all of you, is let's have a real conversation. I think India needs it. Let's have a real conversation. Thank you.
With the introductions, as you can know, at the very end here is Chintabaga, who is managing partner for McKinsey in Southeast Asia. He joined McKinsey in 2001, was elected partner in 2006. Next to him is a man who needs very little introduction here in Singapore, Dean Kishore Mahbubani, Dean and Professor of Public Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University.
And you look at what their potential is and where they are today, the greatest gap in any society, anywhere in the world, is in India. This is politically incorrect. The smartest thing the Chinese did was to open up their economy as much as possible, and they took off. And you look at China's growth, the minute they joined WTO, they took off like that. And so the simple answer for India then, if you can persuade, the goal of this essay is to persuade the establishment, to persuade the population, hey, India should be at the forefront of countries to open up its economy, because if we do so, we'll get a $25 trillion economy.
Thank you. Well, this relates a little bit to your essay as well, Mr. Mahindra, where you start out by talking about how there is this feeling whenever you talk to people about Indian growth that it should be 10%, it should reach China's level. It's just something, some secret that we need to open up to foreign investment, or we need to reform land laws, something will spark this growth. But you come up with a different answer, which is that the growth is not going to come from a decision at the top in New Delhi, that it'll come from decentralized competition among cities and states for innovative solutions to India's problems. I wonder if you can explain that.
Just commenting on Kishore's points, I don't disagree with anything you said, because naturally all Indians want to feel we have potential. That immediately pacifies us, even as you're about to plunge their knee into our stomach. The great word potential. The problem is we've been pregnant with potential since 1947. And I think you ask any woman, whether she wants, anyone knows, if you want to solve a problem, you break it up into manageable, intelligible elements. And then you scale up if you have to. This is a very broad statement, but I believe it applies to anything. It applies to states, it applies to problems, it applies to, today fortunately, even to power. We are finding the answer lies in distributed solar generation power, biogas power. Small is beautiful was trashed a long time ago as not being capable. I think technology is enabling small is beautiful to be a successful strategy again. I'll stop there, but I can go into it. But essentially, my thesis is distributed, decentralized solutions.
Great. I think we'll come back to that. It's a big topic. But since you mentioned decentralized energy, I'm going to turn to Vikram here, because in any of these solutions, any of these reforms that we talk about, a fundamental hurdle is lack of power. Your essay is about this, and you look at the reasons behind the lack of an energy policy in India. Obviously, the falling rupee has brought this out in stark relief recently with rising energy prices. What would you say is the most critical change that needs to happen in terms of changing Indian energy policy?
I don't want to focus on you, Kishore, but let me just pick up on your statement, if I understood it correctly, a wonderfully open society, but a closed mind. And I'll answer your question, but please, okay. But I would perhaps just make one small amendment, and that would be that we are a wonderfully open society, but possibly a closed state, not a closed mind. Closed minds. It's not a question of being ideologically hidebound, which is, I think, what you also talked about. It's a question really of an open mind, but with a supportive state. And that's, I think, going to be the pathway to resolving the issues that I talked about in my essay, which is supply, demand, and environmental issues surrounding energy.
Kanti, let me ask you this. This is something that comes up in all the essays. This question of the state. There's this sense that over the last couple of decades, a lot of India's growth has happened despite the state. Right? This idea that India grows at night when the government is sleeping. It seems like we are reaching the limits of that model of growth, and you need a state that can be supportive, that doesn't just get out of the way. Right? Would you agree with that, and what can be done to try and promote that?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I mean, I'm a political scientist, so the state for me, of course, is at the core of many things. And I think in the book, one of the things that is kind of missing, though it seems to pervade many of the essays, is this idea of whether we're a strong or a weak state. And by strong, you know, I don't think anyone means an authoritarian, knock people over the heads kind of entity, but an enabling and enforcing and, when necessary, regulatory and adjudicating state. I mean, and of course an implementing state. I think if in the next phase, I mean, you need a strong state, not a weaker state. And for a variety of reasons, partly related to liberalization, the idea that the state's getting in the way. We've, I think, disked down the state, and we're facing the limits of that going into the future.
That's interesting. So let me ask you about this, because you put a lot of faith in the ability of state governments and more local governments to counteract some of the problems that happen in the center. Would you agree that that's? I mean, why would you disagree with what Kanti's saying?
It's hard to disagree with Kanti, and I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm flogging my pet theory here again, but what are the odds of this changing overnight and our suddenly having the right number of IAS and IFS people and policemen? Pretty low, at least beyond my retirement horizon, so maybe that's why I'm not entertaining it. But I see these problems being dealt with much more competently by competent leaders in states. If you're looking for success stories, you will find them in certain states. It's remarkable what a man like Nitish Kumar has done in Bihar, for example. It's remarkable what's happening in Madhya Pradesh.
Innovative. I mean, these are gigantic entities. I mean, Uttar Pradesh is 180 million people, and you know, the remoteness of Lucknow from many parts of UP is almost as bad as Delhi from many parts of UP. So, and the thing that's worrying me about the state governments is that, in fact, if you look at these chief ministers, they're more paternalistic in their style. I would say most of them are petty satraps in their style. I don't mean they're petty in terms of the issues they're dealing with. They intimidate their opponents. They intimidate the local media. I mean, the media is lively in knocking the Prime Minister of India and the central government, but they're squashed in the states. And these state parties, they're not.
So my question is, when will you get the same state of mind, the same conviction that if India opens it up, either at a state level, or is there a single special economic zone that's been set up anyway in India? And if not, why not?
Just before last answer the question, yes, there was special economic zone because of setup, and our own group was set up to liven things up here a little bit. Let me be as provocative as you are, Kishore. I'm confused. Okay, I've got Nati here who's also Singaporean. You're Singaporean.
He's Indian.
But he's here right now. He's here right now. He's been adequately influenced by Singapore. So,
we wish.
I've got something I want to ask both of you. On the one hand, you say, look at the state of mind of the Chinese reform. We have the distinguished Mr. Saran here who wrote a brilliant piece just yesterday, I think, in the Business Standard editorial about the lurking authoritarianism behind the reforms. And I was just talking.
They do. The challenge is really how do we actually make sure that the individuals who are part of the state and the institutions that underpin the state come together and align themselves. That's the big challenge right now in India.
Doesn't politics play a role? So, because part of the reason is that there isn't a constituency for.
We want to see a strong and successful India. None of us are detractors of India. What we are disagreeing about is the ways and means of ensuring that we achieve the goal. The McKinsey book says, and the subtitle, by the way, if I can read it to you, is Unlocking the Potential of Asia's Next Superpower. And as you pointed out, they've been pregnant with potential for 40 or almost 60 years now. So the question is how do we do it? And I certainly think that, I mean, I agree with Vikram, by the way, that there is a certain dynamism about Indian society which is
Our legal system rewritten, frankly. We're probably poised at a point where the judiciary has to be somehow completely rethought as well. We just don't have enough judges. So either you get a lot more of them very quickly, or you do something else in terms of how you deal with adjudication and all of that. I mean, look at Parliament, for instance. Today, you have 560 MPs, which we've had, I think, for the last 35 to 40 years, for a population now 1.2 billion.
In your initial comments, you spoke about the centralization and decentralization and distribution. And then you give a wonderful example of your own business model, where you have 2 factories in Madhya Pradesh. And given those 2 connections to GIIS, I was wondering whether centralization, decentralization is what is really happened in your business model. I think what you're happening is centralization versus uncentralization. So can you expand centralization to decentralization? What I think is you're trying to say is uncentralization. It's just like our internet connection, Google. It is a whole system is uncentralized. Nobody is in charge.
I asked a very simple, obvious question. Are there lessons that can be learned from one to apply to the other? And frankly, there always are. I mean, it is, when I joined the Singapore government, I used to work for the economic architect of Singapore, Dr. Goh Keng Swee. And he said to me something very simple. He said, Kishore, no matter what problem Singapore encounters, somebody somewhere has solved the problem. Let's go find that solution and adapt it to Singapore. So Singapore succeeded by copying from the rest of the world. And I always wonder, why don't other countries go and copy from the rest of the world? We've copied and done well. What?
Who wants to take that on? Very quick comment, since we're at the end of time, but I had a wonderful time just before this with a bunch of Singapore, a bunch of them. And it was fascinating for me because they're all kids of expats, kids of people who have been first generation immigrants or second generation, and either in Singapore or have come here from somewhere else. And I asked them, I said, we're going into this panel, Reimagining India. What does India mean to you? What's your imagination? And all of them in unison said home. I said, some of you never even been there. What do you mean home? And what came across to me and made me very positive was, one, that they still had links and saw it as home. But more important, unlike 20 years ago when I was in college, they're not embarrassed to say that. And I told them, I said, you guys, this is a band long before your time with Queen. Freddie Mercury, how many people in the world know that the man is a Parsi from Mumbai? Because he hid it. He didn't want people to know he was Indian. I went to college in America where it was embarrassing to be Indian. And frankly, because people thought that we were weak, that every time you'd meet, it was, have you fed yourself? I think there's been a sea change on that. So when I look at the diaspora, I think they are the ones carrying the flag about what India is going to mean. I told them, I said, you're the new X-Men. You're mutants. You don't even, you're not Indian, yet you're Indian, and yet you're all educated, you're highly vibrant. It's almost like I encountered a new force out there today. I don't know whether you're part of the diaspora, you live here, but I'm saying, forget looking at India, we're going to look to you. And we're going to look to you to make a new imagination of India.
On that note, the cocktail hour is starting very soon, so I need to get you guys out of here. But please thank all of our panelists for this.
Thank you very much to the panel for your insights and what was a very engaging discussion indeed. And we are certainly, I'm sure, all looking forward to reading the book. On behalf of GIIS, I would like to once again thank the chairperson and panelists for spending their valuable time today with us in Singapore. May I now invite Mr. Hajari, well,